G'day, my name's Fiona Kamari Campbell. I'm a Professor of Disability and Ableism Studies at the University of Dundee. Before I start, I want to say that my views are my own personal views and don't represent or reflect the views of the University of Dundee. So now that we've got this out of the way, this morning I woke up to the horrific news that Samuel Paty in France was stabbed and beheaded. He was a teacher in a high school, and he was teaching about uh, diverse views and the role of media and working with his students to look at a range of debates around religion and race. And there were complaints about his teaching, and he particularly showed students two of the Charlie Hebdo cartoons. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can look up the background to the background to those cartoons. Um, when I heard this news, I was shocked, and also wasn't shocked. I thought, here we go again. And there's been a history, over the last 200 years or so of academics being in the firing line, academics who've been jailed and arrested and killed and murdered for the practice of speaking out. And so I felt really compelled after hearing this news to shoot this video with you, which is something I don't normally do, fairly impromptu video, because I'm very passionate about this issue. I think whether you're a school teacher, a lecturer, or a university professor, one of the things is we have a very privileged role to play um, around the formation of knowledge, around speaking out about community debates. We are in that privileged position because of our training and because of our experience and our research capabilities, to share the love about what we do, but also to engage in working with communities around informed decision making and access to diverse viewpoints. Particularly in this era where a lot of the news that we get is on social media, and it can be quite contrived and orchestrated by various bodies. So I do think, actually, as a university professor myself, that there is this role to, as a public intellectual, to engage in social debates. And I think that has to be, there are ground rules around that. It has to be done properly. And so one of the things that I'm passionate about in this particular horrific murder this morning, I guess brought up for me, was the importance of exposure to viewpoint diversity. I'm really zealous about that, about the issue of academic freedom and freedom of speech generally. I mean, of course, freedom of speech is not an unlimited concept. Freedom of speech is always uh, undertaken within the context of equality laws within the country in which the person is speaking. And that's really important. Those checks and balances are there to ensure that whilst we may be free to say what we want, those perspectives need to be in accordance with equalities legislation. So, for example, in the UK, we have the Equalities Act 2010. So I think that's one thing I want to say about that. Um, I do think we are very much, however, living in a very chilly, difficult environment. It's quite toxic. I must say, I always have these kind of debates about whether I should keep my Twitter account open, whether I should really say what I think, what uh, uh, Twitter posts or what tweets I endorse or indeed retweet. Because sometimes that can then set a chain reaction which is out of your control. You can be piled on. People can accuse you of all sorts of things, and that's the same with liking posts on Facebook. I mean, you hear horrible stories of people liking a post uh, and losing their jobs or being subjected to horrific abuse, and that's not on. It really worries me because you know there's a fine line between critique and censorship and I guess totalitarianism as well. I mean, I'm reminded of that very famous Voltaire quote that, I might not agree with what you say, but I'll defend to death your right to say it. And I think that's an important principle. And in terms of viewpoint diversity, I just wanted to say something about that. I think that, often we, as academics, as teachers, as researchers, it's incumbent upon us to not just look at materials that we like, that we might politically like or think is particularly cogent. We need to look at a range of material, including material that we, adamantly and profoundly disagree with, for a range of things. One is that certainly from our own personal development perspective, it's necessary to understand abhorrent ideas, to see how they're argued, to see what they're saying or not saying, for accuracy. I must say I get quite excited when I see a terribly abhorrent quote, because then I kind of will cite that quote and then kind of present a critique and argue against that quote. Sometimes that material can be a rich source of fodder to show, in fact, that there are people, and writers and thinkers and politicians and average community members out there that actually have quite prejudicial views. But viewpoint diversity is really important to show that we can highlight the range of perspectives on issues, whether that be around disability, race, gender identity, women's sex-based rights, the nature of poverty. All these kind of things are really, really important. I really object to the no debate rule. One needs to be suspicious when somebody says this is beyond debate. Actually, we need to engage. We need to develop the art and skill of dialogue, of debating, in order to be able to assess the cogency of the argument, the proofs, the evidence-based nature of the work. I mean, I came across a tweet this morning, which was an anti-Semitic tweet, and and it was a response to the recent attack in Paris, in France. Actually, I don't think it was in Paris; it was in France. But then they kind of put up these pictures of kind of children in an African country, an unnamed African country, at least in the tweet, with limbs missing, and then a more recent picture of men with their backs turned from a Middle Eastern region, again with amputations, and kind of then made this accusation, well, this is what Zionism produces. Now, this is not a discussion about Zionism. This is about accuracy. Somebody responded to that tweet and said, look, actually that African image of African children who had amputations came from the Congo in the 1930s. It had nothing to do with Israel. So we need to really kind of, there's a manipulation of knowledge, and people need to be able to understand what the issues are and what the debates are. I think, as I said, there's been a history of, of teachers and lecturers and professors being persecuted for speaking out. It's not something that in the UK has necessarily led to murder, but certainly there are academics in the UK currently who are being deplatformed, or are being cancelled. I've had to have security guards escort them across the campus. We're now in this era of social media where if you can get a good petition going, there are threats to kind of getting people sacked from their jobs, and just death threats. And particularly with some of the academics in the UK, there's issues around misogynistic abuse, rape threats. So, I guess I don't really want to say much more about that, except to say, hey, this is not on, seriously, because you censor one area of research or perspective or politic, and then if you do that, and then that becomes normative and that becomes acceptable, well, who's next? what's the next group? And I think that there's a very dangerous trend then, as I said to you, towards censorship. Um, and so really all I want to say is, I don't think that, I think it's really abhorrent, and I don't think teachers should be killed for introducing students to a range of perspectives. So, it's incumbent upon us to do that as part of our role. And I just really want you to join with me in saying no, no more, and to also come on board and sign up to the idea of viewpoint diversity. It can be challenging, as I said, to teach and be exposed to views that we find uncomfortable or we disagree with, and but then when we can bring our critical insights into that process, and work with students and work with other colleagues on looking at the strengths and weaknesses of perspectives. So thanks for listening. I hope that didn't come out too kind of drawn out and a bit disjointed. As I said, this is an unscripted video, but I did feel compelled to at least add my voice to the concerns in this area.